Hi guys, you're welcome back to day 2 of our business idea creativity concept or business idea creativity shortcuts. So now we're going to talk about idea findings as well as idea blockage. As I've earlier on mentioned in the previous course, that coming up with idea has a lot to do with creativity. But no doubt about the fact that being able to ask some fundamental questions or take your ideas or business conception through some basic finding stages would go a long way in helping you to come up at a unique value business idea. So now let's talk about the various idea finding stages and the various blockage. First, let's start with blockage. When it comes to blockage, there are some ideas in which ordinarily, in one way or the other, people often blot them out. So we're going to talk about that. And the first among that has to do with sensory gating. Sensory gating has to do with you shorting ideas before, they actually come up to you, because generally we have sensory receptors, that is, information often comes in, and sometimes there are some informations you just tend to block them out of your memory, and there are instances in which you try to block out negative thoughts. And over time, you begin to unconsciously, over time you see people, they shut down ideas which they don't really like, or perhaps they don't see any meaning in it. Rather than giving that idea time to digest, rather than digesting on those ideas and thinking through those ideas, perhaps when the ideas just come up, they just don't, this cannot work. And that has a lot to do with sensory gating. And there has been instances in which a lot of people shut down multi-million-dollar ideas simply because they sensory gate. That is, they just rule out the fact that this idea wouldn't work. And it all boils down to shutting down those ideas right away from thought, not allowing those ideas to materialize. So first thing you want to do is when coming up with, when trying to come up with a business, or when trying to get a business for yourself, either as a part-time support for your financial resources, or you want to delve down into the entrepreneurial route, it is important for you to open yourself to a lot of ideas. That is, when ideas comes in, you should be willing to think through those ideas and as well see how best you can come up with something concrete from it, rather than just shutting it off completely. So that's where sensory gating comes in, and don't be surprised, there has been a lot of instances in which you see people, perhaps when they see a concept, years after the thought came into their mind, at more like an elementary phase of the business concept, in which they've shut down, but they see these ideas now thriving, and they hope like, oh wow, some years ago I actually thought of this business idea, something related to this was actually coming to my mind, but I just shut it off. And in one way or the other, they couldn't they couldn't work on those ideas because they've sensory gate those ideas, that is, they block out those ideas. So when you actually want to come up with a business, or you want to set up a part-time business for yourself, or you want to go into the full entrepreneurship road, it is important to open up yourself to a lot of ideas. Let those ideas come in, let them flow in, think about them, think through, and take them through the various innovative finding stages, which we're going to talk about as well in the course of this lecture. And aside sensory gating, we have strategic block. Strategic block as well has crippled a lot of business concept. And when you talk of strategic block, you talk of people having an idea but not being able to implement the ideas. And the reasons behind that isn't because they don't have the financial resources to actually go about it, most especially from the elementary stage, but they just like, oh, I don't know how to go about this. Here is an obstacle, here is an hindrance towards implementing this idea. I don't know how best to go about it. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know who to talk to help me in this area, And before you realize it, they completely ignore their business idea. And over the years, you realize they weren't able to implement those ideas. Take for instance, I think some years back, I actually wanted to set up an online place like that for it's to cover a specific niche. By that time, I just felt, okay, how do I go about it? And a lot of things were coming to mind, but I was like, okay, let me leave those stuff for something else and take up another project. But no doubt about the fact that if I had actually implemented that idea now, this is far back into, it's going to like 7 or 8 years. I know that business idea wouldn't be in the same place. But in one way or the other, strategically, I ignore that. But in any way, for some other goals or for some other objectives, which I wouldn't say it's something totally regrettable, sort of. But the point is, you want to see how best you ensure that strategic block isn't hindering you from implementing your ideas or your business concept. Most especially if it's not something, in short, if possible, you want to try as much as you can. Don't take your hands off those ideas by allowing strategic block to actually take you off your ideas completely. You want to see how best you keep growing those ideas, keep nurturing those ideas, and reach out to people who can help you, reach out to people who can support you towards you achieving your objective when it comes to implementing your business idea. And aside that, we have value blocks. And there has been instances in which there are good ideas, but some people would like, oh, these ideas wouldn't be generating money for me in the next 4 years, in the next 1 or 2 years. It wouldn't be generating significant amount of money, which I would expect, and as a result of that, they ruled it out. They blocked the idea. They choose not to implement the idea. Even when they have the right team, even when they have the financial resources, they choose to ignore the idea. Only to realize that if they had actually invested or given or actually implement those ideas, now they would have been benefiting from it. And they would have been, one way or the other, contribute to the society positively. And a good example of value block has to do with this scenario that comes to my mind when I was preparing this short course, and that has to do with Facebook. When Mark was actually coming up with his Facebook ideas, he actually invited some of his friends, but some doesn't see values in what he's bringing down to the table, and in one way or the other, they backed out. But here we are today. So in one way or the other, value block as well often comes up in instances when maybe someone invites you to come and co-fund a business idea, or because you felt that idea isn't something that would yield the money in the next 1 or 2 years, you just ignore it. And most especially when you have what it takes to be able to contribute to those projects, you just choose to ignore it. And before you realize it, that project is actually making waves and is actually contributing to the society positively. So you want to try as much as you can to ensure that while trying to come up with a unique business idea, you're trying within yourself not to block ideas completely or not to sabotage yourself by blocking those ideas and by not implementing those ideas. No doubt about the fact that by default some of these things would often spring up, but you want to try as much as you can to always rule them out. See how best you overcome those various blockages. The last of all the blockage is the self-confidence blockage. There have been instances in which people couldn't implement their ideas as well because they felt, okay, it would require them to be able to speak out in some instances. Perhaps speak out or reach out to people who's going to invest in their business, or perhaps speak up and reach out to people who can actually co-fund the ideas with them. They're like, oh, how do I talk to this person? Or perhaps when it comes to getting investors, oh, how do I go about it? I am a shy guy, I don't know how to talk to someone. So various reasons could always spring up, and before you realize it, no doubt about the fact that most ideas are being crippled and right away from the thought process or prior to the implementations. And thus, you realize in most instances, people such ones might actually need those business of a long time to contribute positively to in their own respective aspect of life, and as well to contribute to the society positively. So you want to try as much as you can at every instances to ensure that you are not subjecting yourself to any of these idea blockage. Another interesting thing about coming up with a unique business idea has to do with taking your idea through innovative finding. No doubt about the fact that innovative findings would go a long way in helping you to narrow down your idea in a way that will position you towards thriving within whichever industry you choose to go into. Often, these thoughts of entrepreneurship often comes to my mind, and realistically, in one way or the other, most or many entrepreneurs, they actually survive, and it kind of takes more of an innovation for an entrepreneur to be able to thrive. So in order for you to be able to thrive, you need to be able to come up with something unique, and as well see how best you go around the scaling. We're going to talk much about that in some other course, but in the context of innovative finding, when you're trying to come up with an idea, the first thing you want to do is you want to identify the problem. When you have an idea, because generally idea is business thrives on solving problems, so you want to ask yourself, what is the problem here? And as soon as you're able to ask yourself, what's the problem here? You want to take because sometimes we might assume there are problems, while in the real sense there are no problems. And that's where, that's another challenge, coming up with a business or an idea that's not problem oriented. Let's take, for instance, Amazon, which I mentioned earlier. Actually, prior to Amazon coming into existence, people go ahead and buy books. But in no instances have they actually been able to see someone to save them time. The time of going to bookstores, the times of going around to check those books, and as well, the problem here is times they go to stores, they check books and all of that. But now, there is an idea that's helping them save them the time, and right in their home house, they can always order a book, and the person will bring it down to them, and easily they start reading. So that's a problem. That is being able to save them the time, and whichever it is, the resources going to buy books and all of this. And now, the first thing you want to do is, what's the problem here? You want to identify that problem. And as soon as you're able to take your hands on that problem, you want to take a step further and do some fact findings. This problem, is it only a problem from my own perspective, or it's a problem from other people's perspective? When it's a problem from your own perspective alone, then there might be a little bit of use. But when it's a problem which is well known to everybody, to everyone, you realize, okay, in short, in major instances, if not everyone, but you realize, you do some fact findings, and you realize people would actually need a solution to this so-called problem, then you've actually been able to take a step further from identifying the problem to ensuring that the problem is actually a fact, and it's not more of an illusionary problem. It's a fact problem. Then you want to take a step further and come up with the objective. You want to do objective findings in relation to this problem. That is, how can this problem be solved? You want to analyze it objectively and find out how best you can solve this problem. And when trying to solve a problem, generally there are various ways in which a problem can be solved. There are problems that would have solutions in 3 different approaches. Like the issue of online market space, which I mentioned yesterday, you realize that there are online market space currently in operations in every country you could talk about. And if I want to come up with an idea, as I've earlier on mentioned in the previous course, I would want to come up with something that's very unique that will be able to thrive within the online market space. And that's where idea finding comes in, because after taking the objective, looking into what's actually in existence objectively, then I want to come up with ideas. And when coming up with ideas, I could come up with 3 different models of ideas. I mentioned in the previous course that Amazon has a model or a logic behind its own business model. eBay has a logic behind its own business model. And Auto as well has a logic behind its own model. Then now I want to come up with a unique business model. Then the next thing I have to do is I come up with 3 different models. 1, 2, 3 different models. And no doubt about the fact that coming up with these 3 different models, you realize the 3 different models by ideas would have advantage over one another. Let's take for instance, as I've earlier mentioned yesterday, I could come up with an online market space that gives people the opportunity to negotiate, and as well give people the opportunity to pay over a period of time. I give them the opportunity to negotiate, and as well give them the opportunity to as well be able to utilize their purchasing power. I could as well come up with another business idea, with another solutions, with another model, which I wouldn't mention right now, but I'll as well come up with another one again, which altogether would be more like 3 different solutions. And before you realize it, I would have to take these 3 different models to the idea finding stage and ask myself which of these ideas will be able to thrive over the long period of time, or which of these 3 ideas will be solving problems or will be providing solutions to these innovative findings. And that's where we go down to the solution findings. That is, here now we've come up with 3 different ideas. The objective findings, you'll be able to analyze the various models that are in existence within the industry you want to go into. And now from these 3 different models, you're coming up with the most optimized solution that will be able to thrive within your industry. And lastly, you want to take this idea down to the acceptance finding stage. And this has to do with implementing your ideas and as well getting feedback to ensure that you are actually working in synchronizations with your objective of providing optimal solution to people within your niche. As soon as you're done with innovative finding, then you want to go to the 3rd aspect, which as well is very important, and that has to do with business solution practice. Business solutions has a major role to play as well when it comes to business thriving or business surviving. There have been instances in which business have been crippled. That is, business doesn't thrive, and some startups couldn't go beyond the initial phase because of some fundamental problem that has to do with their business solutions. When you talk of business solutions, it encompasses planning. It encompasses planning, organizations, as well as culture, and as well controlling. How do I mean? When you're coming up with a unique business idea, you need to be able to come up and say, okay, these are my plans. In the next 4 or 5 years, these are the plans for this business concept. You should want to have short-term goals as well as long-term goals. It could be from 2 years to 5 years. And then you begin to strategically work towards the implementations of these ideas. And that's where planning comes in. So you want to plan for your business. You want to have a vision. You want to have a mission. If possible, the short-term vision, the long-term vision. And as well, the mission as well, the short-term missions, as well as, the long-term mission for your business solutions. Also, organization has a major role to play. Organization has to do with those you bring in on board. That is, who are your team? Who are the people you want to work with? Because team has a major role to play. You have the technical aspect, you have the business aspect of your business. So that's why in the course of objective findings, while you're trying to analyze the various business existence. You want to examine them as well in the area of the technical aspect, in the area of the business aspect, so as to be able to provide an optimal solution. So when it comes to organizing, you want to see who are to be in charge of your technical aspect of your business, and who are the ones who are to be in areas of your business aspect, that is the business management aspect, the technical management aspect, to ensure that these are people that will be able to contribute to the vision as well as the mission of the organization. Because one thing about idea is your idea can be so great, you could have the needed resources, but when the team is not the right team, then forget about it. The business, it's more like it would surely head towards a shipwreck. So you want to try as much as you can to avoid the situation whereby your business will not be able to thrive within the online space or within your industry space. Another thing is culture. Culture has a major role to play when it comes to building a business idea. And the first thing you want to identify is you want to come up with a culture that would be able to ensure your company or your business thrives successfully. Let's take for instance, there are cultures, organization cultures, or business companies cultures that are supporting their visions as well as their missions. And before you realize it, in one way or the other, they're shooting themselves by the foot. So when coming up with a business, you want to ensure that your culture it's contributing to your business positively. If you take a close look at organizations that are actually thriving, those innovative companies, when you examine them in details, you want to realize that their cultures has a major role to play in the business running day to day. And those organizations that are undergoing or that are maintaining status quo, that is, those organizations that are thriving, that are, in the position of stagnations, you realize that the major problem as well, in one way or the other, are often tailored to the organization culture. So you want to ensure that you're coming up with an organizational culture that would position your company in the path of what I call progression, in the path of progression, not in the path of stagnation. There are cultures such as generative cultures, generative culture, and we have bureaucratic cultures of organizational structures, and we have generative, and we have the pathologic. So no doubt about the fact that they have different, they operate on different models. Let's take for instance the generative gives opportunities for, it's one of the culture that actually contributes to innovative organizations. But when it comes to pathology as well as bureaucratic, it's not so, it really doesn't contribute much more values to innovative organizations. So generally within your organization, when you're trying to come up, when you're implementing your business idea, you want to try as many as you can, you ensure the culture you are bringing into your organization is a culture that's positioning you towards sustainable success and towards progression in your industry. And one thing about the generic, which I earlier mentioned to be the best that helps innovative company to thrive, is the fact that they are not power oriented and as well not rule oriented as much as a pathological culture as well as bureaucratic culture. But this generative culture gives room for cooperatives within the staffs, and they often let everyone within the organization knows that they have a stake when it comes to contributing to the growth within the organizations. And thus, even to the least staff within the organization, they know they have a role, and the role is tailored towards contributing solely to the visions as well as the mission of the organization. That's why you see that most organizations that have actually been thriving based on innovative concepts, their cultures has a major role to play. has a major role to play within in contributing to their success. Another interesting thing you want to pay close attention to is the controlling aspect. That is, you want to control things in such a way that you will be able to attain your visions as well as your missions. There are variables which are controllable, and that has to do with the products you're serving. You're offering. That has to do with the service you're offering. You don't want to make your product to be constant, without, as well as your service to be constant, without getting feedback from your end users, that is those who are using your product, those who are using your services, to be sure that what you're actually giving them is meeting up with their expectations. So that's why at every instance you want to see how best you control your product. That is, it could be in terms of you control it based on the feedback you're getting from those you're utilizing. Who are utilizing your product or who are utilizing your service. And that's why acceptance findings as well comes into play. You want to be sure that at every instance your products are acceptable and is actually giving people the optimal the optimal solutions which would always help them in their which would always contribute positively to them in such a way that they would always want to consider you as first point of contact in comparison to every other companies within your industry who might be offering similar services as well as yours. Take for instance now, if I want to buy anything online, first there is a specific marketplace that comes to my mind, and that's where I go straight. And when I don't see anything suitable there, then if I don't see what I want there, I go to some other places. And why do I choose these people? First, their customer service has a major role to play. And there's no way, there's no doubt about the fact that oftentimes when I interact with them, I say, oh guys, kudos to you, because the customer service they're offering is more, is per excellent. So the same thing applicable to other services. If you want to render service, if you want to offer product solutions, you want to ensure that what you're actually giving out is actually acceptable and people would always want to come back to you. So that's where controlling comes in. You want to ensure that you're satisfying your customers at every instance. So having said that, this comes to the conclusion of the part 2 of this course on creating business idea. So I hope you find it so interesting, and if you have any question, please don't hesitate to let me know. I will be glad to respond within the shortest time interval. So now we're going to proceed to the third part of the course, and I hope you find that very interesting as well. Thank you.